Welcome to the Energize, Explore, Enjoy podcast, where we bring you inspiring conversations about food, fitness, and adventure, fueled by the power of the energy pods. Let's do this! Get ready to dive into a fascinating conversation with our guest, Jesse. He's not only one of the earliest customers of our energy pods, but also a self-proclaimed music nerd, history nerd, car nerd, and overall, a nerd god. With a big beard, an even bigger heart, and a curious spirit, Jesse takes us on a journey of wonder and discovery.
Hey there, listeners. This episode is sponsored by the ever-amazing KG Food Company's Energy Pods. Are you ready for a flavor adventure? Get ready to taste white chocolate strawberry, breakfast mocha noir, and the fan favorite chocolate nova. These pods are not only delicious, but also are packed with protein, healthy fats, and minimal sugar to keep you going all day. Plus, they come with a built-in spoon for your on-the-go snacking needs. So, don't wait another minute. Head over to kgfoodco.com, kgfoodco.com, and order some energy pods to fuel your life.
I've lived in Napa for most of my life. I spent a short stint in American Canyon when I was in my early teens, and then moved back to Napa. So I've been here for my whole life. I grew up on a family farm, and my dad's parents, they had a nice big property too. So
Where was it?
So the farm was in Napa. It's off of Silverado Trail. It's like one of the only houses that isn't covered in vineyards out there. Yeah, it was kind of like a ranch. It used to be a horse, like a large horse ranch originally. Some famous actor owned it, and then my grandpa bought it in 1986 or something like that, I think. So we kept sheep and goats, still do, pigs. But, it's a nice big property. It was a great place to grow up as a kid. And then, being Portuguese, I have a million cousins and family members. So we would have these big festas, the Holy Ghost Festival, basically, which is I think it was like the last weekend of August. Kind of like a Portuguese Catholic sort of thing.
What happens in it?
So you get there early. You get all these people out, and they have some kind of like just religious ceremonies. My grandpa would build this little, kind of like a small chapel. That it was like a little modular chapel that he made. It was great. Every couple of years he'd repaint it, but it was basically a floor with some linoleum on top, just a real basic like 2x4 floor of plywood, just a couple of walls of windows, and then like a front fascia that had windows and a little door, and then the back, and it had a little roof that you drop on it, and he would just screw the whole thing together. And then you'd cover the floor in pine needles, so it was just like you couldn't see the floor at all, just covered in pine needles, like inches thick. So you walk on that, and it smells really like fresh, piney. And then inside there, they would have, if I remember correctly, they would have a little statue representing the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And it was crowns. They were crowns. That's right. So you had this crown with this kind of like a wand that had, I think, like a dove on the end of it. And so you would kiss the dove, and then you'd put it on your forehead, and then the priest would put one of each crown on your head. And that was just like the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And then they would have these Portuguese bands that would come out and play like Fado music, which is like Portuguese folk. And then you have the big food section. So you'd start, everybody would go out handing out sweet bread, which is kind of like it's a Portuguese bread, kind of like a brioche, sweet, eggy, really, really good. And then glasses of milk on a hot summer day, which I loved. And then you have, crackers and stuff and cookies and, and we have this big oak tree, this huge oak tree that's in the property. And they would build on hay bales and then put like tabletops on them. And you just have food. Like everybody would come out, we'd have like 100-something people there. Everybody.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was, farm was just packed. Like we'd have all these cars, in the front of the property, there's a big field. And so that's normally where everything would roam around. But then they would put all the goats in the sheep back, and it was so funny because like they'd never clean up the poop. Like everybody'd be rolling in, parking, and there'd just be like little goat turds and stuff like all over the place. So people would be walking in from the field, but you carry, everybody'd be carrying in like large baskets of food and like all this stuff. And we'd have like, fried sprats and just tons and tons of deviled eggs and like just all kinds of like great Portuguese foods, like, really nice potatoes and, and like they'd have this like beef. It wasn't like quite like a corned beef, but sort of, it was delicious. There'd be so much random stuff and you could just eat for days. And then they would make sopas, and that's like the crown jewel is this soup, and it's beef and cabbage and some spices, and it's like a really simple thing. And then you soak bread in it too, so you have this bread that's just soft cooked in, and you can just eat just bowls and bowls of that stuff. My cousins and I, we'd all hang out, play like Ghost in the Graveyard at nighttime, which is like, you have a couple of teams split up, and you've got, 30 kids running around this farm at night, and some of them would be ghosts, and you run and you tag people, and then just like that army gets bigger and bigger until you find the last cousin. And it was just great times,
So I have a question. Like this holiday celebration, like, is there like a religious significance to it? Like my knowledge on Christian holidays and all of that stuff is just, I'm a dummy.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I was never like really super religious, so I would just go because it was, a family thing when you have everybody there together. But the Holy Ghost Festival, I guess it symbolizes something.
What day is it? What day does it happen?
It would routinely happen, I think, on the last Saturday of August, which would usually be like the 29th, 30th, somewhere in there, depending on how the day fell in the rotation of the seasons. But always like the last Saturday or Sunday of August.
You guys still do it?
We haven't in a while. I am trying to get we've all been talking about it because the kids, like my mom and my aunt and my uncle, we always wanted to get back together to do that because my uncle lives at the farm now, and so we got to get all the recipes from my grandpa and like get everybody together. But there's so many of those folks now are so old, I think it would be hard to get some of the newer generation to come out, but everybody misses it, so like, I don't know, I think it'd be great to keep doing that.
Were there any influences from the Portuguese culture while you were being raised? Are there influences as well? Was there anything different from like a traditional American family per se?
Like the Portuguese community that's here in California, especially the older generation, is very, very tight knit, and it's like everybody's immigrants. Like I'm a first generation Portuguese American, and my family would come over. From Portugal. We're from the Azores, which are the small islands, like in the archipelago, just like in the middle of the Atlantic, like lots of hours away from the mainland. But everybody is very close. Like we used to do the Portuguese organizational stuff, like down in San Jose. They have a large Portuguese community there, and they put on a lot of fundraisers and things. But I think like a lot of immigrant culture, everything's very tight knit. The Portuguese are known to be quite good farmers, and hard workers. So there's a lot of that hardworking generation. I will say there's a lot of wool. Everybody wears wool, and I don't know exactly what the significance of that is, aside from it being warm, and I guess having an abundance of sheep around. I suppose that would make sense, but. Everybody's very generous, very loving. We spend a lot of time, cooking in the kitchen together and making large quantities of food because Portuguese families usually tend to run deep. A lot of Portuguese people, especially, some of the older generation above me, very like kind of conservative in manner. Everybody likes to party, everybody has a good time, but like the men are usually just dressed very formal all the time, like always wearing suits or like button up flannel, button up wool shirts, like button up, linen shirts, and like pressed dockers and like, loafers and stuff like that. So it's just kind of like a very, like I can always spot a Portuguese guy when I see him. It's just like, but yeah, the culture is very interesting. There's a lot of influence because like, the people who originally were in like the Portuguese land were kind of like Celtic, like Highlanders, like sort of like kind of Viking-ish but not really, you know. And then there was a lot of trade with the Middle East and like with Spain and Africa, and so there's a lot of adaptation from other cultures there. You know, the Portuguese Empire was so big at one point that, you know, it's like just, you know, amassed a lot. The kind of the family stuff and like always trying to help friends when you can, that was always a big thing. Like, you know, to quote Letterkenny, when a friend asks for help, you help them. I went and visited my grandparents today, and it was really nice. They needed some matches and some napkins. So my grandma lights lots of candles, so I got her 900. I told her she'll last you a couple of days.
So moving on from your sort of childhood, like how was your schooling like for you?
You know, I loved elementary school. I went to Vichy Elementary. It was great. Some of my most formative teachers were there. Mr. Silvani, my 6th grade teacher. Guy was fantastic. Taught me so much.
What stood out about him?
He really listened and like paid attention to the students. And, you know, like I remember some days I wasn't really a TA, but some days I didn't really feel like being outside so much. And I'd want to just hang out in his room on my lunch break and like we'd talk about music. I remember he showed me Queen for the first.
Oh, the band.
The band Queen. Yeah. Yeah. We Will Rock You. You know, I remember he played that for me in class. Remember it being so like I was cleaning desks and like the rhythm, whatever rhythm I created, like cleaning the desks, the ones that had the lids that flip up, you know, container. You know, just in whatever method I was shutting him, he was like, that sounds like Queen, you know, and I was like, what's that? And so, yeah, he showed me them. And historically, he was great. Like he taught stuff that was outside some of, you know, the normative school crap where they teach you a bunch of BS. Like it seemed like he was teaching more of like the real, you know, kind of true historian knowledge.
So he was a history teacher.
Like in 6th grade, you still had one teacher that taught you everything, right? So like a little bit of English, a little bit of math, you know, some science, geography, history, like that, and, you know, like that kind of stuff. So he was like a all-in-one sort of teacher. But yeah, his history knowledge was great. And like when we were studying Egypt, like he got some papyrus, like actual papyrus material, so that we could practice writing hieroglyphics on like legit papyrus,
that's crazy, dude.
Yeah, I loved that.
Do you still know hieroglyphics to some extent?
No, I haven't practiced that in a long time, but I mean, I love runes and I love hieroglyphs and like, you know, that kind of stuff. Like one of my guitars, when I got really into just Viking mythology and all that, I have runes carved into a couple of guitars.
How did you get into music? Was that through the teacher's inspiration or something else?
No, I'd always been into music. And my grandfather, he played guitar and he was a Fado musician, which...
What does that mean?
So he played guitar in a Portuguese Fado band, and it's like Portuguese folk. It's really interesting. There's a lot of aspects to Fado music, but like a lot of it is very kind of like solemn. Like it's like the heartbreak of the Portuguese people. You know, it's from the mainlands and the islands. But it's funny because like the Fado musicians then used to be like the bad boys. Like, you know, my grandpa, he was trying to get my grandmother to go out with him for the longest time, and her parents just like were like, no, like he's a Fado guy, he's a bad boy, you know. Like don't go out with him. But he's, you know, like he's super sweet. He did have a bit of a temper growing up, but
so give me an example. Like what's it like? What kind of instruments are you guys playing that kind of music?
So each island has its own version of a guitar. The island that my family's from, Terceira, they have a 15-string guitar. Like normally,
Jesus Christ!
A lot of times you'll see like a 12-string, where you have the normal 6 strings, but then you have the sympathetic strings that go with it. But on the 15-string, you have, I think it was like the 4 low strings, and I think I have one of his 15. I do have one of his 15-string guitars. You have 3 strings for I think 3 of the top strings, and then 2 for the high strings. And so that was like for the lead instrument would play the 15 stringer, and you get this really full, rich, you know, kind of like droney sort of sound for the big chords, and he would pluck, you know, very fast and almost kind of do solos and things like that. And then you have the rhythm players who play like a regular 6 stringer. There's mandolins, and then like normal 8-string mandolins. And then they have this other instrument that I think it's a mandolin, but I don't remember what the name of it specifically. But it has I think 10 or 12 strings, but it has these really weird little tuners that are kind of like little straight knobs that attach to this really crazy curly headstock, like way more than like how a violin is curved. They're super trippy looking, and it's kind of has like a really deep gourd shape to it, I suppose. But yeah, they're really cool. And then you have the singers, usually male or female, depending, and
percussions.
Yeah, there's some percussion. Not as much, though. It's mostly stringed instruments. Sometimes you have a bass, but yeah, I can't think of much Fado that has percussion in it, to be honest with you.
And what kind of music do they kind of like focus on? What kind of vocals or lyrics do they focus on?
So a lot of the lyrics kind of focus on like beauty, love, that kind of stuff. And then there's a lot of like heartbreak or like feeling homesick. A lot of the sailors would sing like the kind of like the homesick fados and things of that sort. And then, like the fado for the people in the mainland, like in the 50s and 60s that moved to the U.S., like they talk about reminiscing because they left a dictatorship that was just, terrible at the time. Kennedy allowed the Portuguese people like almost like a free pass to come over here to escape the dictatorship, like a refugee acceptance type thing. And then I think in the 90s, the dictatorship fell, and it's much better now. After the dictatorship fell, it was very, very rough over there. All of a sudden you have like this huge explosion of like drug problems and things like that. Cause like you couldn't even accidentally litter or like, speed or jaywalk or anything like that. Like the government was so strict. My grandpa was telling me about that. That's crazy. But yeah, he came here in the 60s. A lot of Portuguese immigrants came in the 60s.
Came in the right time.
Yeah. So many of them were farmers and stuff too. And like, a lot of the dairy farms in the Central Valley in California, a lot of them are Portuguese owned. Like you'd have a sponsorship where someone would vouch for you to come over, and then they would basically get you a work placement program. And in a lot of these dairies, they would have like little trailers or something like that for the people to live in, and you would still get 1 to 2 meals a day, and you'd still get paid. So like a lot of these early farmers, they'd be stacking money working and not having to spend that much. And then you could take that money and you could send it back to Portugal to get somebody else to come back over here, and do that. That's what my grandpa did. He came and worked for some, I think it was a German family making church pews, and was just sending money back to Portugal every week. And then eventually got my grandma, my mom, her twin brother, and my younger aunt with us to come over. But yeah, like it's a lot of lovelorn. And then you have the limericks, which are kind of like the jokey kind of Portuguese songs, and a lot of them are really dirty, stuff like that. Like it's funny because like every time we have a little family get together, we get my grandparents to sing some of the old songs, and then sometimes they'll do the limericks, and they'll be translating them, and some of them are pretty filthy. It's really funny. Is it as sort of like dirty rap music or something like that? Yeah, I mean there was my aunt was trying to translate one of the songs, and it came out to be something about squirting or something like that. Yeah, it's just like my grandma's singing it. It's just the sweetest thing. It's so funny. But yeah, and she's singing some lyrics about squirting or something like that. It's hilarious. My girlfriend was laughing so hard when that finally made it around the table. That's what that song was about.
Damn. Yeah. Is it saying in like the Portuguese language, or was it?
Yeah. It's saying the Portuguese language.
So you guys had to literally translate that to understand it was a dirty song.
Yeah. Like there's, I understand a little bit of it. I wish that I knew more, but yeah, a lot of that more advanced stuff or slang, and I don't know all that stuff these days, but I'm working on trying to learn it again.
Sounds great. So that's how you got first introduced into like hardcore music per se. Was that when you purchased your first guitar when you were sort of with your grandparents and stuff like that? Yeah,
I was 11. I'd always kind of fooled around on his guitars when I was younger, and then I finally wanted one of my own. But I remember when I was a kid, my grandpa was a carpenter, and so we'd always have like wood and stuff around. So I'd make little instruments like with rubber bands and nails, and like make a little 3-string played music, And yeah, my dad bought me my first guitar. It was a blue Johnson acoustic off eBay for like $70 back in the day.
How old were you when you bought that?
I was either 10. I was either 10 or 11. I don't remember exactly, but around that age, 7th grade. And yeah, I learned some music. My dad made a recording of my sister and I playing like some Elvis songs and like some other just like jangles and stuff like that. My dad got a little microphone and recorded it. And then I think a year later, I got an acoustic guitar, also off eBay for like $100. And I still have that guitar. My mom has the Johnson. Yeah, and then I got my BC Rich. After that, in 8th grade, it was a Metal Masters pack.
Shit.
Yeah.
That's a legit guitar.
Yeah. That's the one I carved all the runes
At
in.
8th grade, you were able to get a BC Rich. That's insane.
Yeah.
Can you explain to people, explain to people what BC Rich is, by the way?
Yeah, so BC Rich, they make a lot of extreme, styled guitars. And, I mean, they have some regular looking ones, but they're very notorious for their extreme, pointy, crazy guitars. And I remember being like, a little 10-year-old, 11-year-old metalhead and seeing that. I'm like, yeah, that's my jam right there. And yeah, it was like a $150 Metal Master pack. It came with a little amplifier. I got it at Guitar Center. And, to this day, I still play that thing a bunch. And it's funny because the neck that's on there should not have been on that guitar. That neck is way nicer than what should have ever been on a little cheapo starter kit guitar. But yeah, the Warlock, it's funny because it's all pointy, but it is still one of the most comfortable guitars that I've ever played. Like sitting down, you've got the two like big spikes that come off the bottom, and that part just like cradles your thigh perfectly. And then the other spike sits in your lap like just right, and it's such a good playing angle for sitting down without having to worry about holding it up or always adjusting your strap and stuff. It's great.
And you started to upgrade your rig from that point onward. Dude, I remember when I got my first guitar, I was raised in Pakistan.
Yeah.
I had to fight for my guitars.
Oh, yeah.
Because music was not a thing that people really liked, and I couldn't play it super loud either.
Yeah.
So, man, I remember my first electric guitar was something that was totally unbranded. I don't even remember what it was.
Yeah.
But the first guitar I got was also an unbranded acoustic guitar. Probably something that was like, I don't know, $30-$40 tops.
Yeah.
Best case scenario. But man, I think that there's a solid connection you form when you first play your guitar, and then you're like, wow, I can do that? That's
right?
awesome. And then you before you know it, you're spending like a full day just playing that thing for 8 hours straight. Was that what happened with you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I didn't get super serious with it until I was maybe like late 8th grade, early 9th grade. Before I would just kind of like putz around and do like some chords here and there. But I remember that feeling of like getting your first couple of chords down and you're just like, I can make some decent sound right now, This is great. Yeah, I know I wanted to play metal when I was in like 7th grade, but my guitars that I had or my amps, like I didn't have a distortion pedal. I didn't have like anything like that made that metal sound. I remember that Johnson, I had this, I had like a canteen, and the canteen had these metal clips on it. And I would put the metal clips on the strings, like down by the bridge, and you'd play it and it would sound all distorted. And I was like, all right, cool. Like, I know this isn't quite it, but like to me, like this is like kind of a distorted metal sound. And then I remember trying to play like some Pantera on it or something like that, I was like, all right, we're getting there.
What were some of the bands that really influenced your early play style and got you kick-started into metal?
Rush and Metallica were huge, even though I could like at that time playing that stuff was like unfathomable to me. But yeah, I remember like listening to 2112 and like Master of Puppets when I was in 7th grade and 8th grade, and then like Pantera came out, and I remember my friend JT, I'd been listening to like Linkin Park and like Disturbed and like System of a Down and Korn and like that kind of stuff, and I was into like that kind of heavy like new metal sound, but not like Limp Bizkit, that kind of crap. But I just, like,
Limp Bizkit was not metal, man.
No.
Well, like
yeah,
hard
they think it's
rock,
like new
rap
metal,
rock,
crap, whatever. Yeah, but and then like Static X is interesting. I was like never super into Static X, but I was like, all right, this is kind of like I kind of like this. And then I remember my friend JT comes running up to me and he had some headphones. He's like, dude, check this out. And then I just feel the headphones like close on my ears and I hear the dun, na, 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 like the entry riff to Walk by Pantera. And like, I know there's a lot of controversy with them right now, whatever, because they're all douchebags, but Dimebag's dope. But like hearing that at that time, I was just like, that's what's up. And then he like rips the headphones off my head and just like dips out. I'm like, so the next day at school, I come back, I'm like, what was that? And he's like, oh, that was Pantera. And I was like, that's sick. So I went and I got a Pantera album. And then Alice in Chains too. Alice in Chains is huge. And they're still such a big part of what I like now in music. Yeah, I loved Alice in Chains. And yeah, just delving into metal from there, like 9th grade, 10th grade. I started getting more into like death metal, black metal, getting into some of the extreme stuff, and like the Metal Encyclopedia website, like I remember when I found that in maybe junior year, I'd be up all night on the Metal Encyclopedia website and just like finding bands from all these different countries and like really getting into some rabbit holes with that kind of stuff. And my buddy Cody and Corey too, we would be sending each other music. I'm like, dude, check this out or check this out. Just finding all this awesome shit.
So let's move away from school. What happened after schooling?
Well, so when I was in New Tech High, I started working, and I started working for Minuteman Press, that was my internship.
What was that again?
Minuteman Press. They're it's like a franchise print store.
Okay.
But my dad was friends with Don Krieger, the owner of the one that was here in Napa, and I needed an internship, so I started going there. And then shortly after, they're like, we like you. Let's hire you. Because I've been doing graphic design in class, and I always thought that stuff was fun. So I would do graphic design with them and help design, menus for restaurants and stuff like that, and business cards and things. And I would do a lot of the production work too. And there's this gal Laura that worked there. She's like this 50-year-old lady, and here I am, like 17-year-old. We'd just be chatting it up. She's kind of like my little office friend. And we would be doing production. Like we had this giant paper slicer, dude, that had like an 8-inch razor on it. And you could put maybe like 2,000 sheets of paper and it would just slice through them like butter, and just do all this. It had all these lasers and stuff on it to keep you from putting your hands in there. But Laura and I would fuck around with that thing and like try to figure out ways to get past the lasers, but you have to have there's 2 buttons on either side and you had to press both buttons with each hand. So it's like, all right, cool. So we know your hands are here. And then you had to put your feet on these pedals. And then if one thing lost connection, then it would stop immediately. But we'd fuck around, try to do shit with that. And then, went from working there to, I think I was like working at Cutco, like selling knives or something like that for like a little summer after high school job. And then I started working for Stetson Engineers. That was a water resource firm in San Rafael. And one of my buddies, his mom, hired me on. I was like an accountant, administrator, assistant or something like that. And I would basically just fold giant water table maps and like file paperwork and just do goofy stuff. But I would, there was a couple people in that office that were just like, they're such the biggest dildos, dude. Like I had this guy that would come in and he would complain about going over budget and like yelling at the accounting administrative department. But it was like, he had like a clear budget and he would always go over it and then come back and yell at the accounting department. So like, and the administrator, the manager, she was like my friend. I was like, screw this guy for being a jackass. And it would happen like every week. So occasionally I would be tasked with earthquake proofing like bookcases and stuff like that. And they're like, oh, you have to put these new, supports up because these are the new code ones or whatever. And so I would go into this guy's office and so maybe we should blank out what company name this is. We'd go to this guy's office and I'd be like, hey, I got to put these new, these new things up. And he'd be like, oh, okay, I thought you did that last week. I'm like, yeah, they changed it again. and I'd like put like sheets of cheese like behind his bookcase and then bolt them back up. So it would start to stink. And he'd just be like, what the hell's going on here? Can you check behind the bookcase or like whatever, can you look to see? I'm like, oh, there's nothing back here. And just have like, I don't know, just goofy little prank stuff around the office. And I'd put like little post-it notes that I'd have arrows pointing to stuff, but then there'd, be nothing there and people would follow the arrows. like just mindlessly around the office for a little while. That was pretty funny. I remember listening to a lot of hip hop when I was working there too. Like I was always listening to A Tribe Called Quest, The Far Side, because it was just like good music to like move around and just do kind of like mindless stuff too, you know? Yeah, digging really deep into like early East Coast and like some early Southern stuff. And then of course all like the California classics too. Yeah, I always think of that. Like whenever I don't know, I just have so many memories of being in this file room listening to The Low End Theory by Tribe Called Quest. And like that always brings me memories of being back there.
You're going to be one of those people who lives by music and dies by music.
Oh yeah, it's always been a huge part of my life.
So after that job, what happened after that?
So I got laid off from that job, and it's a crazy thing about that. And I know we were kind of talking a little bit earlier about like prior to the podcast, but like deja vu and dreams and like kind of like psychic stuff. I'm going to take a quick detour here. This is related to this story. But when I wasn't sleeping a lot and I'd be on this kind of like other plane, and like dreams and like deja vu were such a powerful thing, and they still are for me. But I had a dream that I was packing up my desk at that office, and then I wake up the next day, and I used to carpool with my boss because she lived here in Napa too. And I remember just like kind of like waking up and like I was just like, I was like packing up my stuff. And I didn't even have stuff at my desk, but just like metaphorically in my head, I'm putting everything in this little container, you know, and like my friend's mom's like upset, you know, and everybody's like kind of waving bye to me. So I walked to her house, and like we would leave at like 7:35, like on the dot. I get to her house around like 7:15, 7:20, because I'd get in there and make coffee while she was finishing getting ready. And we have a little bit of coffee and just say, you know, good morning and whatnot, and then hop in the car and go. And it's like 7:35. She's still kind of like in her PJs, and like I'm just like, what's going on? And she's like, oh, you know, we're not rushing today. And I was like, okay. Start feeling kind of weird. And it's like, now it's 8:15. She's sort of kind of getting ready, but not really. I'm like, is there something up? She's no. And then she sits down. She's like, all right, I got to talk to you. And I was like, okay. She's like, we had to lay you off yesterday. And I was at work the day before, you know, and like nobody said anything. I had no inkling that this is going to happen. Nobody said nothing. Nobody was acting weird. They're all keeping it very under wraps. And they're like, we have to lay you off. And I was like, that's crazy, because like I had a dream about that last night. That I was like packing my desk up, you know. She's like, what? She's like, did you hear something? I was like, no, I didn't hear shit. But yeah, and then I just started like noticing stuff like that a lot more. Like I'd be dreaming about things, and like, you know, I'd see stuff a little bit later on. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but it's just an interesting thing. So no segue. I got laid off of that. And yeah, and then after that, let's see. After that, I remember having a really hard time finding a job for a while. And I was sharing an apartment with my buddy. My mom was helping me pay rent, and I felt garbage about it. But like, you know, I don't know. Just the job market at that time was tough. I couldn't even get a job at McDonald's. And I was just like,
what years was this?
This is like 08, 09.
Oh, yeah.
Around there.
Our country wasn't in the cans at that time.
Yeah, maybe between 2009 and 2010. Yeah, I wasn't 20 yet. So, yeah, it was between 08 and 09. Yeah, dude, I couldn't even get a job at McDonald's. You know, and like I remember that just being like rough. Like I remember going to interview, and I wore a button-up shirt and a tie and some decent pants to McDonald's and couldn't get the job. I remember they called me like a couple days later and like, yeah, sorry, we're not going to hire you. And I was like, you know, I'm a decently smart dude. I'm a hard worker. Like, why couldn't I get a job flipping burgers and like, or even just, you know, taking out the trash or whatever. And that I remember being rough. And then shortly after that, I had a temporary job at a farm up on Mount Veeder. And that was pretty crazy. We'd go up there. It was nuts. It was this lady, she was like a caretaker, and then there was this other older guy that was a caretaker. And it was like some family's house, and then they had a farm on it. And so we'd go up there, we'd tend to the garden, and we'd do stuff around the property. Like we had to build like some chicken fence because the mountain lions were getting in and snatching the chickens. But that happened on a lunch break too. We were building the fence. We just about had it done. We stop for a lunch break. We walk up, and then all of a sudden we hear this huge like kerfuffle, and then run back down there, and sure enough, there's chicken just got ripped to shreds. Like some mountain lion hopped like that one little gap that we had left up top. you know, in hindsight, we should have finished it. But they're like, this lady was like strict about like lunch at 12, you know, like we don't go a minute over. Yeah, like, oh, dude, there's this lawn that I had to mow, and it was like after it rained, and it was this huge slope, like big, giant lawn, and it was all sloped. And, you know, I'm sitting there, well, not sitting, and I was like pushing the lawnmower up, and then coming back down the hill was sketch balls because, like, you got this mower in front of me that's self-powered, and I'm trying not to slide down this hill while I'm holding this mower back. And it's like slick, and all I could think of was like sliding forward, my foot going under the back half of the mower and just like getting mauled by that blade. And it was like, but then if you spread your feet out too wide to avoid the mower, then it's just like you can't walk like that. And it was, I don't know, it was that was crazy. So then that was just a temp job. On my way back in, I spent like my last like paycheck on groceries, so last me a little bit. My buddy Alan was next to me in traffic, and he's like, "Hey, come check out my new apartment." So I go over there, hang out with him for a few minutes. He's like, "Hey, are you looking for a job?" I'm like, "Yeah, actually I am." He's like, "Well, I've been working night shift in the bakery, but I'm about to become a baker, and my delivery position's open, and I actually kind of recommended you for the job already. So why don't you go check that out?" And so I walk in, and I'm like, the old boss, Ann, who is Tom Seaver's daughter. Tom Seaver was a famous baseball player at some point. I'm not a big sports guy, but I thought that was pretty cool.
I know this. Our product, our energy pods, what's her name? Ann Seaver?
Yeah.
So she has her studio.
Right, yeah,
so,
in Calistoga.
Yeah, so they shelve our energy pods over there, which is kind of awesome.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, so she used to be my boss in the bakery. Yeah.
What a small world, man.
Right? Yeah, she hired me.
She's cool.
Yeah, she's a very cool lady. Yeah, I liked her a lot. So yeah, I walk in there, and I'm like, "Hi, I'd like to apply for a job." And she's like, "Oh, we don't have any positions open." And I was like, "Oh, my buddy Alan just told me to come down here." She's like, "Oh, you're Alan's friend? Come on in." And yeah, they're like, "Do you have a driver's license?" And I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Do you have a clean record?" And I was like, "Yeah, I have like maybe a speeding ticket or two." She's like, "Okay, you want to start tonight at like 2 a.m.? I was like, "Okay." I had plans with my buddy that day too. Afterwards, my friend Aaron that I used to play music with, he signed us up for like this mushroom foraging class in Mill Valley. And so, yeah. Oh, sorry, it wasn't that night. It was the day afterwards. So yeah, my buddy Aaron picks me up. We drive out to Mill Valley, and then we come back in the evening. And I think I took a quick little nap and then got up and went to the bakery and started my first shift. And it's funny, the guy that was working that night, who was supposed to train me, was this dude that I went to middle school with in American Canyon. And I'm like looking through the window, I'm like knocking on the door, and he's like, "Who the hell is this guy?" And they never told him that he was training a dude that night. And so I'm not knocking on the door, and he's looking at me, and I'm like, "Hey, yeah, let me in. I'm starting tonight." And he's like, "Oh, all right. I didn't know I was training anybody, but whatever." I worked there for a long time too, doing graveyards. And yeah, it was crazy because like I already had insomnia really bad, and that job kind of seemed perfect because I was working late nights, and I was living in a little apartment with my best buddy Josh. And I just get so tired of like having to be quiet because it's like thin walls in an apartment complex. Like I couldn't play guitar loud, I couldn't play video games, I couldn't be creative and like make things, you know, which is all the stuff I wanted to do while you're up late at night and your brain's just spiraling out on whatever. So that's why I ended up spending so much time researching stuff. And people always say like, you know so much about so many things. Like, you know, how'd you learn all this stuff? And I just like, don't sleep. And you just read and you learn things and you research stuff. And, you know, and then a couple weeks later, you get hooked on something else that you think's cool and you start reading about that. You know, or painting Warhammer figurines. I would do a lot of that while I couldn't sleep. You know, playing video games and stuff too. But yeah, it was an interesting time. So I was like, well, getting kind of tired of being in here and having to be quiet, so might as well make some money and deliver a bunch of bread and pastries.
What happened after that job?
After that job, that's when I managed a retail store for a while, and then I left that, and I'm kind of just working on a new journey now.
Coding.
Yeah, coding, traveling, trying to remember to just be a human again and not be such a work slave.
So I have a question over here that I've wanted to ask you for a very long time, and that's pertaining to our business. Like, you were one of the first customers for our business as well. Tell me, how did you even hear about us?
Well, so Corey, started promoting the energy pod stuff a long time ago.
Was this like 2018 or something like that?
Yeah, somewhere like that. Because I had seen some posts that you guys made, and Corey was talking about it, and anything Corey does, I support wholly. And so I was like, yeah, I'll try that out, because I was on my feet all the time, and I was getting pretty heavy set at that job, and so I wanted to try something that it's like, how can you turn down chocolate, right? And but I was like, this is low calorie and pretty low calorie, I think, for in terms of the nutrition that you get out of it, all the protein and everything too. And yeah, that concept of being satiated, like when you're bored or hungry and you want to just eat a bunch of crunchy stuff, and then you pound through an entire bag of potato chips, and like you're just like, oh, it still doesn't feel like I ate much. Or you overcompensate and eat a giant sandwich, because you think you're still going to be hungry, so you might as well take a sledgehammer to a job for a ball peen hammer, right? You eat way too much, and I used to do that all the time. But like getting some of those first energy pods and eating those, I'm like, yeah, I mean, you got something here, because it's instant, because you guys blend everything down and make this, kind of like pudding that's packed with protein and MCTs and all these things that make you not hungry and also feel like you've got something. That's great for being on your feet. I hate having to be on my feet and feeling full. Like, to this day, I still don't like eating a large lunch. And even then, I don't like having that big of a breakfast. And that's still, unless it's like a weekend, and I just want to kind of chill, like, get like a nice pile of pancakes and bacon or, eggs, whatever. If I just want to have like a lazy weekend morning. But, yeah, I really like the concept behind it. And I started getting some energy pods from you guys. And yeah, I mean, they've been fantastic. Yeah, just the other day, I had one of the new chocolate ones in the freezer, and it was kind of a hot morning, and I didn't really want to eat too much. And then I remembered, I was like, oh, I've got one in the freezer. Hell yeah. So I grabbed that and took it to work with me, and had a little bit of coffee and ate a pod. It was perfect.
Which brings me to the next question, actually, as we're getting closer and closer to wrapping things up as well.
Hey listeners, before we jump back into our fascinating conversation, let's take a moment to appreciate the delicious goodness of KG Food Company's Energy Pods. These delightful pods come in a variety of amazing flavors, like white chocolate strawberry, breakfast mocha noir, and the ever-popular Chocolates Nova. And they're not just tasty, they're also packed with protein, healthy fats, and minimal sugar to keep you fueled throughout the day. Perfect for when you're on the go, these energy pods even come with a built-in spoon for your convenience. So, go ahead and treat yourself to these mouth-watering pods that'll make your taste buds dance. Visit kgfoodco.com, kgfoodco.com to grab your favorite flavors. And now, let's get back to our inspiring guest.
How did you get into cooking and the culinary world?
I didn't cook much until I was maybe like 14. My grandpa would always help me prep. Like, I remember like peeling just like garbage bags full of potatoes for him whenever we were making like a big potato soup for like the parties and stuff. But when I was 14 or 15, I became vegetarian. Just like, I think I was just eating like too much cheap garbage food, and I just felt sick all the time. And some part of me decided that it was time to give up meat for a while and kind of get back into eating good. And then that first month or two of being a vegetarian was rough, because like I didn't know what to do, and I was just eating like cheese pizza and mac and cheese and like, garbage food. Then my mom started bringing me Indian food all the time, and because most of it's vegetarian, and she's like, well, I know you like spinach, so try this sag paneer, and you like goat cheese, like this is perfect, and stuff like that. And so I got really into that, and then that's when I started cooking for myself, because I was like, well, what do I want to eat? My mom didn't really know what to do. She taught me how to like make eggplant parmesan, and then we started cooking more vegetarian stuff together. But yeah, it was those first couple of years of cooking were rough. I think back to some of the stuff I made, like that was like 90% olive oil, like just crap. But yeah, I moved out, lived with my buddy Josh. I started cooking a lot more, so it was just cheap. I survived off of like couscous and like quinoa and stuff like that for the longest time. But yeah, I mean, when you're cooking like at least 2 meals a day, you got a lot of time to practice. And then Corey and I would cook together a lot too. We'd make these giant Scooby-Doo sandwiches. It was the guys at the bakery would always make me like a giant like 3-foot baguette,
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that was great. Like you had to flip it in the oven because whenever we tried to broil it to toast it or like, melt the cheese, it would stick halfway out of the oven. So we broil it, turn it, flip it, put it back in there, broil the other half, stack it full of like mushrooms and whatever we wanted to cook that night. Yeah, and then I just, I love cooking. I love experimenting with stuff, making new things. I don't follow a lot of recipes, but I do like them for theory. But I kind of like to just wing it. Like if I have a couple ingredients in the fridge, I'll see what I can make with that. Or like if I'm just running through the store, sometimes I'll have no idea what it is I want to make, and I'll find like one ingredient that, okay, I want to do something with this tonight. And then my brain will just start calculating like different things that I could do. And then I usually just take it and go from there. Like this morning, my girlfriend and we had breakfast together, and I haven't been able to cook us breakfast together in a while. But I got some of those crescents, like the Grand's rolls, and I had some cream cheese, and then I was going to cook those up, but I was like, oh no, I know I can do something with this. And I put cream cheese on the inside of the roll with some of that black garlic from Trader Joe's and then like some freeze-dried basil, and then just rolled those up and brushed them with a little bit of butter and cooked it. And then my girlfriend takes a bite and she's like, oh, what's in here? And it's like cream cheese with black garlic and basil. And she's like, oh, you made this? And I'm just like, yeah. She started like tearing up a little bit. She's like, all I wanted was like hot cheese. It's so cute. I love cooking for her too. Like she's kind of like my food muse. Our second date, first date, we ate a bunch of sushi, which I love sushi dates with her. Second date comes over. I made raviolis from scratch. Like made the dough. I did everything in front of her, so she knew I wasn't fooling around. Made the dough, made like a wild mushroom ricotta stuffing. I think I even made the ricotta from scratch. And then made the sauce, shaped them all up. I had this cool little ravioli press that you could just put a sheet in, stuff it, roll it over, throw that in there, cook that off. And that pretty much sealed the deal. I think that was a good move on my part to make that night. But just cooking for her is great. She's so enthusiastic. Yeah, I love it. It's definitely one of my love languages, cooking.
I remember that about a week ago, we created some crazy pizzas with our product as well. I was like, holy moly, I never thought that date crust pizza that we made. Yeah. Jesus Christ. Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah, with the vanilla creme fraiche.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly.
That was a memorable one.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's exactly like, when we were talking about collaborating on that. I went into the store that day. I was like, all right, we're making pizzas. And I was like, I know I want lemons and pizza. And something creamy to complement the energy pod. And I just started walking around in the store. I was like, yep, I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that. Yeah, the date stuff, cream fraiche crusty, that was literally on the spot. I had no intentions of doing that prior. I was going to put like the dates or the figs. I wanted to do figs, but I couldn't find any. So I grabbed the thing of dates instead. And those were going to be on top. And then when you and Corey and I were hanging out in the kitchen, I was like, oh, you know what? Why don't I just stuff the crust with dates? And that was so good.
That's like $1 million idea right there for any food business, to just create like a date crust sort of pizza. That's really good.
I mean, you could do it with a savory pizza too. Like instead of using like the vanilla creme fraiche, you could use regular creme fraiche or maybe like a mascarpone or a cream cheese, and then stuff that. And then you could do like, some like kind of funky like jamon iberico meat and like some good stuff. You can make a interesting funky pizza with that for sure.
Awesome, man. So I'm going to have one last question for you. What is one of the craziest experiences you've had in your life that you can think on top of your head?
I'd never done a cross-country trip, and to do that with Rosie, moving her from Atlanta to California was great. I had a little bit of a rough time because I was really tired and I had gotten a really nasty cold somewhere along the way. It hit bad in New Mexico, but I still had a great time with her. And seeing the Grand Canyon in person was breathtaking.
So just to sort of backtrack a little bit, so you guys moved from Atlanta all the way to California.
I moved her from Atlanta to California, yeah. So we had met online when she moved to Napa to work in the wine industry, and then she stayed with me for a couple months, moved back to Atlanta, and then she decided that she wanted to move back to California. So I flew out there, helped her pack up her stuff, and then we drove in her car across the United States. And we drove from Atlanta to Tennessee that first day, and we went to the Country Music Hall of Fame. And then that was really cool. That was an awesome museum. And then we went to some restaurant, try to get like some hot chicken, Nashville hot chicken. But it was the day after 4th of July, so everybody was hungover. A lot of places were closed, but we ended up finding a restaurant that was pretty cool. Then we drove to Little Rock, Arkansas that night. I think we drove through Memphis to get to there. And then in Memphis, we stopped at this gas station that was like in the cuts and the ghetto. And there was like some fight that was breaking out with some pretty interesting characters. Made it to Little Rock at like midnight, stayed the night there, and then we drove from Little Rock to Santa Fe, New Mexico the next day. And that was insane, dude. Like, such a long drive. We should have stopped in Texas somewhere, but when we finally got to Texas, I think at like 6 or 7 p.m. Oklahoma, we spent so long driving through Oklahoma. It was like bumper to bumper the entire way, which is insane because I think we were going through Oklahoma City probably, but it was like an 8-lane highway and it was backed up, like completely backed up. And I was like, how is there that many people to do this?
That makes no sense.
No sense.
I mean, LA maybe.
Right.
But over there,
yeah,
it makes no sense.
Yeah, it was crazy. We took 40. We drove 40 the whole way across, and finally get to Texas. Driving through Texas, and all of a sudden, we went through the Panhandle. We didn't go down through 10, but about halfway across, this huge thunderstorm, hailstorm, just hit us, and the driving through some of that was so sketch because there's all this road work on 40 through Texas, and you're driving down a single lane highway with those barriers, the barricades on both sides, and it's like can't see nothing. Car's not gripping that well. Like, I got people on my ass doing 70 through these little barricades. Like, this is crazy. And finally get through there. We make it to Santa Fe, New Mexico at like 2 in the morning, and then crash. We went to Meow Wolf the next day, which is a really cool art installation in Santa Fe. And then we cruised around Santa Fe downtown for a little while, and then drove to the Grand Canyon that night. Stayed in a school bus on this dude's property.
What?
Yeah.
Hey, what was that about?
So this dude had all this land, like out in the desert, not far from the Grand Canyon, and we rented this converted school bus. Like, the dude put a little bed in there. There's a little sink.
Sort of like an Airbnb?
Yeah, it was like a little Airbnb, but it was a school bus. And then it was on his ranch. And so, like, he had a little communal center. There was a little kitchen that was all well water. And then he had like a shower system where you basically start a little fire, warms up the water, and then you get a hot shower. There was a outhouse that was underground. That was crazy.
That does sound really crazy.
Yeah, and it was all like the septic thing was part of, I can't remember if he used it for compost or whatever, but it was all like wood shavings that you'd throw on it, and then the toilet paper, we had a separate receptacle for that. But that was really cool. The dude was super chill. He had a bunch of chickens. There was llamas. It was just out in the middle of nowhere. No cell phone reception. And so we had the little directions printed out because you're driving down an actual highway, and then all of a sudden you cut off on this little dirt road, and you're driving through the desert trying to follow some tire tracks from earlier in the day, basically to get to this dude's little commune.
How did you guys find that guy?
I think we found him online.
Craigslist or something?
No, it was like, I don't think it was booking.com or Expedia or something like that. It was some, was it hot camp? I think it was like hipcamp.com or something like that. Rosie found that one. I think it was Hipcamp. But yeah, he also had like some Airstreams, and he had some like a larger RV type thing that was, that was kind of just parked. So there's a few different options for, people. But it was cool. There was a little fire pit in the back. We bought some pizza in Scottsdale and then drove to that school bus, and we ate the pizza and the salad on the little backseat of the school bus. And then next day we drove to the Grand Canyon, hiked around the Grand Canyon for a while. And then from there, we drove to LA to see her mom, stay the night in LA with her. And then we drove up to Paso to see my mom and hung out with my aunt and her partner and my mom downtown Paso, stayed the night. And then from there, we drove back to Napa. But it was like 6 days, I think, of driving. But yeah, the Santa Fe to New Mexico one was, or the Little Rock to Santa Fe drive was just brutal. It was like 16 hours.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah. But it was, yeah, we had a lot of fun. We stopped at all those Love's truck stops. And, they had nice, clean bathrooms. They were big truck stops. It was the place to go. And they all had like little chicken stands in them.
Can you sleep in those overnight or something like that?
If you had a trailer or something like that, probably. I don't think you could just sleep in your car at those places.
You guys probably slept in hotels.
Yeah. We stayed. We got a room in the Marriott in Little Rock. What, for $60 or something like that? Like
that's
cheap. Big room. It was a king size bed. Like
$60.
$60. Yeah.
Unheard of.
Yeah, that was great. I found that I think on Expedia. And then Santa Fe, we stayed in this really cool little motel. It was like a little roadside motel, vintage Route 66 type place, and that was a really cute little spot. It was a nice room. That was a cool spot. It wasn't that far from Meow Wolf. And then we got some tamales from this little Mexican joint around the corner of Meow Wolf for breakfast, and those were really good. And then, I think we got some food after Meow Wolf, and then we left. But, it was a good time. That drive was great. And it was, I hadn't spent a bunch of time in the South, so it was cool to drive through Tennessee and Arkansas, Oklahoma, seeing that. It's been a long time since I've been in Texas. I think the last time I was there when I was 8, visiting one of my grandparents. Yeah, I don't know, it was cool. And meeting Rosie's mom was nice, very sweet Armenian lady. She lives in Little Armenia in West Hollywood.
Sounds good, man. So looks like you've seen quite a bit of life in your life.
Yeah.
Do you have some final message or any pearls of wisdom that you'd like to share with people?
I think this is something that is kind of, I'm trying to find more again. Just like, don't get sucked into the BS of life. Obviously grinding for what you want is important, especially if you have goals and stuff in mind, but you got to remember to stop and relax and try to do what makes you happy. Make sure to exercise. And I've been sedentary for a long time. I've been working and being on my feet and that kind of stuff. But in terms of actual physical exercise, I have neglected myself heavily with that. So I'm getting back into that, and I'm really enjoying lifting weights and really pushing myself, pushing my boundaries of what I can do. The human body is an incredible thing. So you got to make sure to treat it right. Don't burn yourself out, and take time to cherish the people you love. I think that's a really, really key part of life.
You just basically said the theme of the podcast, which is energize, explore, enjoy in just a very more elaborate and deep way. I think that's awesome. So how can people find you?
I've got an Instagram page. It's called Jesse Cooks Dat Flavor with the DAT. I'm on there. I'm on Reddit. I just post food pics and stuff on there too. That's about it.
Sounds great. Yeah. I'll put all the links in the show notes, and thanks for being on the show, man.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Next week, we're exploring a tasty topic that will satisfy your appetite for knowledge. Join us as we delve into the world of food additives, uncovering the intriguing history and fascinating science behind them. Get ready to have your taste buds tantalized and your curiosity sparked. Stay tuned. Thank you for listening to our podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate, review, and subscribe to our Energize, Explore, Enjoy podcast on your favorite podcasting platform. See you next week.